Welcome back, legends. Welcome to another episode of Plant Field. I'm your host, as always, Callum Weir. So this episode, again, another about me. There was quite a few questions that came in a few weeks ago, and I didn't get around to answering every single one of them without making the episode somewhat longer than it needed to be. So we kind of split these up into a secondary episode, and I think there may be a third one in the future with the amount of questions that had been asked. As you may be able to tell, my voice this week sounds a bit rustic, sounds a bit bunged up, and that is realistically me coming back to the UK. And I think spending a lot of time in London, being overrun with various different outlets, and I've managed to catch the flu. Or I wouldn't say the flu. The flu is pretty bad. Kind of a more severe cold that I'm just getting over. So if it doesn't sound like my normal voice today, that's why. But we're here, we're pushing through, and we are still going to go through with this Ask Me Anything episode of the podcast. I think a few weeks ago, when I did put it out, there was probably around maybe 110 questions, which was great. It showed that you wanted to know about a bit more about me or ask questions that may not have been answered on the podcast with different guests. However, what we managed to do was, any ones that were similar, turn them into kind of the same question, and then any others we would just kind of pursue later on down the line, whether that be, in an episode or on a reel, or on a TikTok, YouTube, whatever. And that's what we're going to do. So I think we have another, 10 to 12 questions here, and hopefully one of your questions, or some of your questions, if you are watching, do get answered. So, without further ado, let's dive in. How many vegans die from protein deficiency every year? Unlike the popular belief that vegans are protein deficient and we are all dying of protein deficiency, and it's so hard to get protein, the realization is that there has not been a single case of protein deficiency in a vegan ever. There's not been one single case of a vegan dying with protein deficiency. Obviously, protein deficiency does exist in the world, and it does exist in, some third world countries, and it does exist in people with extreme eating conditions, such as anorexia and bulimia. But when it comes to vegans, there is not a single case of protein deficiency. Of course, it is a subject where obviously somebody may have a eating disorder and they may be vegan at the same time, but correlation isn't always causation, and it's not the vegan diet or the plant-based diet that is the main culprit of what's going on there. It's normally down to the case of the eating disorder, which is unfortunate. But obviously the media picks that up, and that kind of gets escalated out of hand and pushed in a general agenda of, hey, vegans are protein deficient and this person died because they were protein deficient, but they don't really look at the full picture of the story. In the Western world, most people get a sufficient amount of food per day. With that in mind, if you're eating a sufficient amount of food, whether that be on a plant-based diet, whether that be paleo, whether that be, vegetarian, pescatarian, any of those, even if you're eating a lower amount of 1,500 calories, for instance, you normally would be hitting your very minimum protein targets. And I think we mentioned in the past what the protein targets are, and they are your body weight in kilograms times by 0.9, which is the very minimum you should be having. So that could look like 59 grams of protein for someone, which over 2 meals can easily be hit very simply, and that could be through, a bowl of oats in the morning, with, a bit of peanut butter and a few other berries and maybe some nuts and seeds. And then let's say a lunch which consists of like a wrap or with various other veggies and food in there. Even if you'd have that much, you may still be under the protein requirements. However, you still are getting an amount of protein in there that will never kill you off. The minimum would be, your body weight times 0.9. But going under to a detrimental lack of protein on the diet is near on impossible in the Western world. Where there's places like food scarcity, yeah, it happens. In places such as Africa or some parts of Asia, where food scarcity is huge, you may see protein deficiencies. But also, if there's a consistent eating of things like beans and rice, we still rarely see it because those two together create a complete protein, in which, if eaten even twice a day, should be giving people their protein requirements. That's not to say there isn't any other deficiencies that can be detrimental to someone's health in those places. It's just not normally a protein deficiency. Next question. I eat meat, but I'm looking to become healthier according to the science. Is there any advice you would give me? Absolutely. Obviously, I think with this line of work of nutrition, it's always meeting people where they're at. And if you still eat meat, great, but you're looking to become healthier, so you're looking to implement strategies into your life that are going to make your life healthier. Hopefully look into, a bit more longevity and creating better outcomes for yourself. Now, if you're not going to reduce meat intake, or you're not going to cut out meat intake altogether, then what I would say is, when it comes to your plate, make it a varied plate. So let's say, an animal protein, for instance, is quarter of the plate, and then we use the other quarter for, a carb source like a grain, a pasta, some quinoa, some couscous, whatever you fancy. And then the third, like the half, that would be a mixture of different plants. That can be, your leafy greens, that can be your salady bits, that can be your lentils, that can be your chickpeas. Any of these things are a great indicator that you're making more of a conscious effort to create a better standard on your plate. At the moment, the general consensus, or has been for quite a few years, is meat and 2 veg, and we now know from the science that that's not the case, and we should be looking at majority plants. So as long as you're adding more plants into your diet, more variety of plants as well, more diversity, so aim for about 30 different plants per week. It doesn't always have to be in one meal, it can be in various meals throughout the week, but 30 plants is definitely one of those things that you want to be looking into. That way you're creating a lot more diversity, but also at the same time you're feeding your gut microbiome as well to give you the best outcomes. You're fueling your body with antioxidants. You're creating an atmosphere where your body can thrive and also fight off free radicals. Free radicals are the things that can create, disease and illness within the body. I would also say, even if you cut out meat a few days a week, for instance, and rely on some higher plant protein foods, you're going to see a reduced risk of things like, heart disease, cholesterol, stroke, and various other diseases that can be caused by higher consumption of meat. Now, I'm not saying cut out meat completely. If that's something you still want to do, that's fine. I would just say maybe cut out meat a few times a week. Look at more of a blue zone diet, for instance, where maybe the meat a few times a week, but a tiny portion of it as well. And then have the rest of the great plant protein sources, such as your lentils, your chickpeas, tofu, tempeh, seitan, or multiple others. Plant protein is an amazing source of protein. It's not a secondary source of protein. It's amazing for you, and it can still give you exactly the same benefits if eaten enough of as its meat counterpart. Which actually kind of leads me into my next question here, which is, why do you focus on the micros instead of the macros? So the macros for me, they're great. Like, we focus on our protein, our fats, our carbs, but that doesn't really show longevity. That doesn't really show health. We're now in a world where we are so marketed into believing that protein is the superior and only thing that we need. We're also told that we don't need carbs. While they're not vital for our survival, we still do need them for energy. And people, focus on either low-fat diets. However, fat carries nutrients around the body, and those nutrients are your micronutrients. So we're looking at our vitamins, A, C, D, K, and K2, and then vitamins vitamins B1 to B12, and then also looking at all our other micronutrients as well. These things looking like our iron, our calcium, our copper, our selenium, our zinc, our phosphorus, our magnesium, our manganese, our choline, all these different things, and all these different things have such an impact throughout the body. For instance, if you are low on zinc, for instance, that you can lose your taste, you can lose your smell, and that can be quite scary for some people because they think, maybe there's an illness coming on, but it could be, just lack of zinc in their diet. The same with selenium. Selenium is one of those things that can kind of help stabilize your thyroid. Amazing. But not many people know about that, which is, upsetting, but also not common knowledge. So I think at the moment I focus on the micronutrients because they are the things that actually make us thrive. Yeah, protein, carbs, and fats, they're great. Your omega-3s, they're great. But we need to be looking at the smaller things inside of us. Those are the things that are keeping us thriving. Those are the things that are keeping us alive. Those are the things that are making us who we are. They're the things that are going to help us create the best version of ourselves. We need to be looking at all of those little micronutrients, making sure they are in the best way, shape, and form for our bodies to thrive. Like your protein, your fats, and your carbs, they don't work without the rest. For instance, protein, if you don't have calcium, you don't have magnesium, you can't build muscle. But everybody just thinks protein, protein, protein. It's not just protein. It's protein, magnesium, and calcium. If your magnesium is low or your calcium is low, you're going to find it a lot harder to build muscle. And not just build muscle, I mean cramping in general as well, just doing day-to-day tasks. You typing on a keyboard, you need protein, you need magnesium, and you need calcium to stop your fingers cramping. They are little muscles. So I think all these things are so relevant for what we need, but most people overlook them completely. Do you have any resources to make things easy for me to learn? I do. If you go onto my website, there is a free nutrition guide, which talks you through every single nutrient within the body and makes it simplified and easy for anybody to understand. So you don't have to work with me to find out these things, or you don't have to listen to me to find out these things. You can read. So for instance, if you want, to download it and then, every day spend a new day finding out about a new nutrient, you can. Other places you can learn though are, I'm on YouTube, where I go through and will be going through every single different nutrient. Instagram, I give out a lot of free information on there. There will be more free resources coming out soon. And also Substack as well. If you go find me on Substack under Callum Weir, I do write about human performance and human nutrition. So if it's not the podcast, if it's not YouTube, or you're not a fan of watching things, or maybe you don't want to listen constantly and you want to learn by reading, because I know that's some people's preferred source, then I do have a free nutrition guide. Even if you go onto my Instagram at Plant Fueled Nutrition and click that link in bio, you will find the free nutrition guide. How much research do you put into making sure you know what you're on about on every episode of the podcast, because there's some serious topics, especially when it came to the episode a few weeks back on PCOS. So yeah, there is a lot of effort that goes into every single episode of the podcast. Whenever I have a guest on that I know not much about, whether that be PCOS, whether that be endometriosis, whether that be hormones, I research beforehand. I research the topic as much as I can in the time frame that I have. I will also listen to various other podcasts around that topic, or with the guest I've got coming on surrounding that topic. I will email over, some questions or some thoughts that I have, just to kind of, correspond with whoever the guest is, to make sure it's something that I'm just not making up on the spot and hoping there might be an answer for it. There's a lot that goes into it, so there's a lot of research. Normally the research takes 2 or 3 days. That can also consist of reading a book. There's been a few people on here where I have read their book prior. I'm not a fast reader. So I'm, listening to podcasts, reading, corresponding with whoever's coming on, just to make sure whatever I'm saying doesn't sound too stupid if I know nothing about it. What else goes into it? I mean, even trying to find the right person to talk is, that's a hard one, because some people have these egos and these influencing, or have these egos and can influence online, but it doesn't mean they necessarily have the right qualification to be speaking about these things. So I like to make sure I'm doing the proper research onto the person to make sure, there is some sort of qualification there that gives them permission to, speak about this, not just from a anecdotal point of view, but from a science point of view. I don't want to be talking about anecdotes, because as much as they're great, that doesn't always mean they're going to align with everyone. So I think looking realistically at the person in question, making sure everything's up to scratch, and then researching on every different part of the subject that I would like to speak about as much as possible. It is hard, especially when you're pumping out an episode per week. Luckily, the 2 About Me episodes that we've just done, they've been a bit easier, because there's not as much research, because it is just me and my own opinions and thoughts. But yeah, for instance, the PCOS one, that was a hard one for me, because I know people with PCOS. I've asked about PCOS with those people, but because it's something that I'm realistically not facing, and I don't have anyone in my life as of the moment that has it, it can be hard to take a stance on something when you don't know too much about it. And I want people to feel heard and seen, but this is an issue for a lot of people, but just because I don't understand it doesn't mean I shouldn't. So looking into things like PCOS, like endometriosis, like any of these other subjects, it's better for me to know, because then I can help people in the future as much as I can. But also it gives people, a platform to listen in and learn. I know you've had a few ads in the past, but how do you make sure they align with you? I get asked this question a lot, especially on Instagram. On here I don't get it as much, but yes, there has been ads in the past, and I have collaborated with brands in the past. I can count, though, in the last 5 years how many brands I've collaborated with, and that is around 8 brands. I'm very picky. I will not just take the money and run and just go with it, because I respect you. You've given me your trust to listen to me every week, sometimes for 2 hours. It would be a disservice of me to start promoting something that doesn't align with what we're talking about, and doesn't align with nutritional ethics or sustainability as a whole. I've had brands reach out to me and be like, hey, would you like to promote this? I would love to. I would love to take the money, but it's a disservice to me. It's a disservice to the listener. And, I don't think especially when it comes to nutrition, everything's what it seems, especially when it comes to supplement companies and, you know, those companies that you see sponsoring every single podcast. For instance, we look at people like AG1, they sponsor every podcast basically on the planet. You look at Joe Rogan, you look at Rich Roll, you look at various others. Because they have so much money and they sponsor so many, I don't necessarily trust them to have my best interests at heart instead of making money. So I'm very picky. I will only use brands, or I will only promote brands that I've used in the past. I will only promote brands that at least give me a trial or so to kind of try these things out to see how they feel with me, and then allow me to give honest feedback. Yeah, I think this all comes from me working alongside Cora and Spink, and also Vitality. Vitality I use on a everyday basis. They are algae-based phytoplankton supplements. I use them, and I have no problem promoting them because I know they are sustainable, I know they are ethically sourced, and I know they're an amazing product. I also worked alongside Cora and Spink because they are a sustainable brand. They do something that I think is beneficial to the world, you know, creating a plastic-free, ethical, sustainable bag. I need a bag also. And, you know, aligning my values and ethics with my lifestyle is something that I need to do. So if I can showcase that with a brand that I'd love to work with, absolutely. I think in the past as well, I worked with Tipper Tempeh, and that was amazing. I eat tempeh every day. They sent me a load of stuff, like, and I promoted them. But I brought Tipper Tempeh in the first place, so the fact that they gave me more of it meant it was cheaper for me. But also, I got to align my values with something that I actually eat every single day. Vitamin A, can I get it easily on a plant-based diet? You can. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around vitamin A. Yes, it can be harder to get if you're not eating a varied, colourful diet. So our, you know, leafy greens and our reds and our orange vegetables are all amazing sources of food that have beta carotens in, and beta carotens then get converted into our they are preformed vitamin A, and they get converted into active vitamin A, which is amazing. Great. However, yes, meat does have a lot more vitamin A. Yes, we just have to take the beta carotene version and then it gets formed into vitamin A. However, sometimes, you know, if the person's diet is more like the standard American diet, then there can be some conversion rate discrepancies. So the conversion rate might not be that good because they've been eating, you know, beige food and junk for a while, and then they've just started eating some sort of plant like a sweet potato. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a great conversion rate. Like, the more optimal the diet, the more optimal the conversion rate. So we need to be looking at our lifestyle change as a whole. Having vitamin A as the preformed version to conversion rates, we need to make sure that we just have an optimal standard of diet in the first place. You can't just, you know, eat beige food, eat a sweet potato and expect to be fine. That's not how it works. It needs to work throughout the whole entire process. You can't just be hoping to eat one thing and waiting for that vitamin A to be preformed. Same as omega-3. Like, if you're eating chia seeds and flax seeds, and that's great, but if your, you know, your overall diet is not that great, then the conversion rate is going to be so much lower, down to around 1 to 10%. Whereas if you had an optimal, healthy, plant-based diet, full of like dark leafy greens and a variety of foods, that conversion rate is so much higher. So vitamin A, is easy to get. Just, you know, I think we need to be a bit more cautious about the overall diet. Do I ever question my nutritional stance? I have done. I have done many times. Not the ethics of my nutritional stance. I strongly and firmly believe that, animal products are not great for the environment. I think it's unnecessary, harmful, and painful, and causing a lot of unnecessary harm for no apparent reason when we can get the rest of the food, rest of the vitamins and minerals we need from food. That being said, I think when you first start off and you get a lot of contradicting information all the time, that you can fall into a trap of wondering if what you're saying is right, or wondering if, my science kind of overlooks my ethics. And I think, yes, my nutritional stance at some points has been pushed and shoved around with just the contradicting information that's out there, but I have never ethically changed my opinion. I don't sign up to the thought of, carnivore being superior. I don't think vegan is superior. I'd say a whole foods plant-based diet is, I would say, the more superior. Or if we're going to take my own food thought out of it, then I would say more of a Mediterranean lifestyle would be the better way of life. Mainly because we look into the blue zones and you see these people, eating a predominantly plant-based diet and living in it at hundreds with amazing health. So yes, when you see things like that, like the blue zones, for instance, you do kind of question your own nutritional stance. But my nutritional stance stays the same, mainly because that stance also aligns with things like the blue zone. Realistically aligns much like the Mediterranean diet as well. It's predominantly plants. It is plant focused. It is plant centered. I've just gone the whole way and I've got rid of all animal products and it is just plants. However, that is the general consensus with a lot of these places with the healthiest diets and the healthiest lifestyles is a predominantly plant centered diet. Plants versus animal protein, no difference. When aminos are exactly the same and you eat the same amount of protein with the same amount of aminos, there is absolutely no difference, and has been shown multiple times. The only difference there is obviously animal protein has a lot of saturated fats and cholesterol. Plants don't. And realistically, the main difference there is that one can create illness and one doesn't. One can start creating illness. One can, elevate the heightened risk of disease, and the other cannot. So I think they're the only versus that really matter. Animal versus plant, if the quantities and the grammage and the aminos are exactly the same, there's absolutely no difference in muscle hypertrophy. Thoughts on the Liver King documentary? I have seen it. You know what? I respect the Liver King for coming out and saying and doing that and kind of showing what social media can do. What social media can do if you just live an extravagant lifestyle and people will just draw onto that and be like, that's amazing, this person can live like this, they can, if they're only eating this so they can look like this. It shows an enhanced perspective and what people get drawn to very, very easily. And that's a shame. Liver King documentary. I think his name's Brian. I would say he was, maybe 90% honest in that. I think we all knew that the guy was on steroids before it came out. It wasn't hard to tell. However, he has gone back on himself and been like, hey, the carnivore thing isn't amazing and I've changed my opinion on it. But yeah, I still find it wild that people get drawn to this kind of crazy lifestyle and believe what they see from a 30-second reel. Because the guy was apparently living on, like wooden pallets on the floor and things like that. All a bit insane. Anything I should start doing to look after myself more, I'm going on into my late 50s. What I would say is up your protein, up your calcium, and up your iron, and also add in some resistance training 3 times a week into your daily routine. And what I mean by resistance training is, maybe that going for a run, or, going and lifting a few weights, or, having some resistance bands and just playing around. Resistance training is just you, and just creating some resistance between you and your muscle to make sure that your bone density and your muscles don't fade away, but also looking after that protein, that calcium and that iron. I would also say maybe look after your omega-3 levels a bit more as well. I would say they're the main 4 that I would say into your late 50s you should be looking out for a bit more. We ever take the podcast to in-person podcasts? I want to. And I've done a few of those in the past. I actually done one recently as well with Arjun and Sarah and Priya, which will be coming out soon. However, I would like to take this podcast as a in-person podcast, and it will happen in the future. Just at the moment, I've been away constantly around the world, so it's been a bit harder. People aren't just going to willingly fly to Bali without me paying for accommodation and flights, so that isn't a sustainable business model. However, when I do get the equipment back, I will be taking this, in person. So watch this space, it will be happening. At the moment, it is still very much online. Is there any episode you would recommend listening to of your own podcasts? Oh, there's so many. This is kind of like the question last time of which guests are my favourite. I'll give you 3 from this year, and I'll give you 3 from last year that I think are, worth listening to. When I say worth listening to, they're all worth listening to, but the ones that I would say are more stand out to me. I think this year there was one, the environment and our diet in comparison to the environment with Sapna Purivember. Amazing episode. Please go back and watch that. It was amazing. I also think the one with Dr. Aaron Spitz this year on penis health and erectile dysfunction and various other men's issues was a eye-opener. I definitely think a lot of people can learn from that, especially as they kind of get into that older years. I know the starting episode of this year, Scott Wallace, amazing, insightful, so elegantly put that, we should be looking after our lifestyles, how we should be showing up for ourselves, how we shouldn't put limits on ourselves, manifestation, all of those. Scott was amazing. He put everything so beautifully, and definitely one to listen to from this year. I now feel really bad because there were so many other episodes, but I would say yes, Scott, Sapna, and also Dr. Aaron Spitz. Last year, I would say there was a lot I learnt from. I would say Lisa Patterson on preconception and pregnancy, amazing. Alex Caspiro on plant-based kids, children. And, if they pick a last, I think Renee King-Sonnen as well, in regards to running a sanctuary and her lead up to her being who she is, was just so inspiring and hilarious. Renee is one of the most humorous people I think I've ever come across. I love her to pieces. So I'd say they're my 6 go-to episodes, I would say. I mean, And that's only my opinion. I don't actually listen to the podcasts back. I never have listened to a single episode of myself. So from memory and the edits, that is the episodes I would go for. Is there any more questions this time? No, I think this time we're gonna leave it here, and we'll have the rest for next time. So thank you so much for sticking around. So thank you so much for your questions. It means a lot that you want to know more about me or other subjects, or the fact that you've just given me your time to listen in. But thank you so much for being here. I'll see you on the flip side. Peace and plants.